I now invite Punita ma'am and Ms. Priyadarshini to the stage. A very good morning to one and all present here. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the very first event organized by the Stella Maris Sustainable Development Students Hub here at Stella Maris College for the year 2025-26. A milestone moment and one that we all have been looking forward to. I'm Praptika Singha and I'll be your host for today's event, guiding you through what promises to be a vibrant and enriching experience for all of us here today. This event is in collaboration with the Chennai International Center, which is a premier platform that brings together thought leaders, policy influencers, scholars, and changemakers to foster dialogue and engagement on issues that matter. Their involvement in today's program reflects their enduring commitment to knowledge sharing and civic engagement, especially on matters of sustainable and inclusive development. We are truly honored to partner with them for this meaningful session. And now, let us invoke the divine presence to bless this occasion. I request the department choir to take the stage as we begin with the prayer song.
He is exalted, the King is exalted on high. I will praise him. He is exalted, forever exalted, and I will praise his name. He is the Lord, forever his truth shall reign. Heaven and earth rejoice in his holy name. He is exalted, the King is exalted. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high.
Thank you for the beautiful rendition, choir. It is now my privilege to invite Dr. C. Chandramouli, retired IPS and IS officer, Managing Director of the Chennai International Center. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. A. Punita, Head of the Economics Department, to deliver the welcome address and introduce our chief guest for the day. Ma'am, we warmly invite you to the podium.
Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to see our distinguished guests, Ms. Priyadarshini and Mr. Sabarivaj from the Chennai International Center, esteemed faculty, bright and vibrant students gathered here today for what promises to be an insightful session. We are thrilled to kickstart the academic year with this event, proudly organized by the Sustainable Development Hub, the Department of Economics, in collaboration with the Chennai International Center. We extend our sincere gratitude to the Chennai International Center and especially Dr. C. Chandramouli, the Managing Director, for their collaboration and in bringing this event to Stella Maris College. Their commitment to fostering insightful discussions and connecting us with accomplished personalities is truly commendable. Mr. Chandramouli is unable to be here because of an important work. On behalf of Stella Maris, we thank him. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome the guest for the day, the speaker for the day, the author, Ms. Priyadarshini. It is also my distinct pleasure to introduce the esteemed speaker. Ms. Priyadarshini is an acclaimed eco-fiction author and a dedicated IB educator from Kodaikanal, Tamil Nadu. Her captivating stories are deeply inspired by the rich ecosystems of the Western Ghats, and passionately she champions for wildlife conservation and environmental awareness. Her debut novel, The Myth of the Wild Gore, was introduced by renowned conservationist Zai Whittaker, and her second book, The Guardians of the Forest, by the scholar, poet, and artist Murli Sivaramakrishnan. Most recently, in 2015, Ms. Priyadarshini conducted an incredibly engaging workshop at the Hyderabad Literary Festival, blending storytelling, creative writing, and conservation for both children and adults. Ms. Priyadarshini's work goes beyond storytelling. It cultivates a deeper connection with nature and inspires us to become the guardians of our planet. We are incredibly fortunate to have her share her wisdom and perspective with us today. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Priyadarshini and to the other esteemed guests. Over to Ms. Priyadarshini, and hope you all enjoy the session along with us.
Good morning, everybody. I know this is very early in the morning. Some of you still might be waking up, though I hope not, because I think you had a class right before this. And like ma'am already told you, my name is Priyadarshini, and I am an author, a writer, a researcher, and also a teacher from Kodaikanal, Tamil Nadu. Okay, so before I even start, how many of you have heard of Kodaikanal? I'm sure everybody in the audience would have. Raise your hands if you've heard of Kodaikanal. How many of you have visited Kodaikanal? At least 50% of this audience, I'm sure, has visited. Now, you might think of Kodaikanal as a tourist place, as a beautiful place to go, have fun, relax, enjoy with your friends. But I'm here to tell you that it's so much more. And that's where my role as an author, as a teacher, as a storyteller, and as a researcher comes into play. Because I want to tell you that India's mountains are more than tourist destinations. And as somebody who was born in Kodaikanal, who was brought up there, I also grew up with the many environmental issues that's happening there. And much of it is caused by tourism. So I'm here to create that awareness that next time you visit a hill station, Kodaikanal, Ooty, wherever it might be in India, please look at these places as more than tourist destinations. So, of course, I have a PPT here with me, but I'm going to be speaking to you more than what's on the slide, so that it's more interactive. At any point of time, if you have any questions, if you really want to say something to me, you're more than welcome to stop me at any point of time throughout this presentation, right? So, all of you know that Kodaikanal is known as the Princess of Hills, right? Everybody goes there for their summer holidays to have fun, to enjoy, like I said. And of course, Kodaikanal is part of the Western Ghats, as many of you might know. Many people confuse the Kodaikanal mountain range, which is part of the Parani Hills, right? They confuse that for the Nilgiris. The Nilgiris is something different. The Nilgiris is more commonly known. Kodaikanal is part of the Parani Hills range. So that's slightly different, okay? This is just for your information, and as I go along, you'll understand a bit more of the work that I do. Right? So can we just go to the next slide? So I want to show you a video. I was a speaker and a delegate at the Hyderabad Literary Festival that happened in 2025, this year. And I just want to show you a clipping from this video for you to really know the kind of work that I do and my purpose as an author. So if we could just play that video before moving on.
My aim is also to do all of this through children's literature, because I think children's literature is a very important way in which we can connect to the younger audiences and tell them that a place like Kodaikanal is not just a tourist destination. It's so much more. The minute I ask anybody, have you ever seen Kodaikanal? Have you ever been to Kodaikanal? The only thing they say is, yes, it's a lovely tourist destination. It's a great place to hang out. It's a great place to relax. But beyond that, what else is Kodaikanal beyond that? What are the environmental issues in Kodaikanal?
So I just wanted to show you this clip because it perfectly encapsulates what I want to do as an author. And so, of course, you might be wondering, why does she do this through children's literature? For me, children's literature is really, really important because I get to connect with the younger audience and they are the future generations. So it's really important that they know ideas of sustainability, of conservation, of environmental awareness and protection. So all my books are children's books with regard to the many environmental issues in Kodaikanal related to its conservation, related to wildlife migration, etc. So of course, I get this question a lot. Why don't you write for adults? What is wrong with writing for adults? I mean, I've always felt that reaching out to kids is a lot more significant because they are our future and it's really important for them to know what is happening in our own country. And another thing I often share is, we all know Greta Thunberg. Everybody talks about the kind of good work that she's doing. But when we're talking about international environmentalists or environmental issues that happen internationally, we often forget what is happening in our own street, in our own neighborhood, in our own locality. So for me as an author from Kodaikanal, I also want to do my part in sharing my stories from my own land, which is, many of you might want to be writers too in the future. So I'm also trying to tell you that to be a good writer, you have to have that authentic voice. You have to bring about stories that nobody else can write about, because those might be the experiences that are very unique to you. From Kodaikanal, I'm only the second author to emerge from those hills, right? So it's quite a significant thing to be, thank you so much. So it's really significant to be writing about these issues. And everybody writes pulp fiction, romance, etc. And as a young writer, I can do that as well. But no, I really want to make a difference to where I come from, because I really feel like it's my responsibility. If you don't write these stories, then who else will? That's really a question you have to think about. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about my work and what I do, so you'll get a better idea of, exactly what I'm trying to do here. So we can move on maybe to the next slide. Of course, I want to talk about my first book. It's called The Myth of the Wild Gore. How many of you have heard of the Indian bison? The Indian bison is also called the wild gore. Many of you who have visited Kodaikanal might have seen it. Have any of you seen the Indian bison? If you haven't, it's very much there in Vandalur Zoo. I'm not too happy about it being in Vandalur Zoo, but it's there. So next time you go to Vandalur Zoo, please check it out. How does it look like? It looks like it has deep, dark, chocolate brown skin. And it looks like it's wearing socks on all four legs up to its knees. It has white fur up to its knees. Extremely beautiful animal. It weighs around 1000 to 1500 kgs. The bigger males are around 1500 kgs. Much, for those of you who haven't seen one, much, much bigger than a cow, of course. I mean, in this picture, it looks a bit like a cow, but no, it's much bigger, very heavy animal. But interestingly, it's also very flexible. It can run very, very fast. It can jump over high fences. So what do you think is happening to this animal these days? I'll tell you what's happening. As I was growing up as a child in Kodaikanal, I noticed how these animals started moving from the forests into Kodaikanal town. Now that led to a lot of human wildlife conflict, because people started attacking it, people started throwing stones at it. And interestingly, it was not the local people who did it. It was more of the tourists who came to Kodaikanal who thought, oh, there's a bison on the road, let's attack it with stones. Okay? But why did this happen? Why did these animals start moving away from the forest? Why did they feel a need to enter into the town, right? And of course, the reason is glaring at us in the face. It's because of deforestation. It's because of the grasslands being wiped off. And especially during the pandemic, Kodaikanal saw a lot of resorts were built. I don't know if you came across this. During the pandemic, there were a lot of advertisements for staycations and work from a mountain, work from a hill station. So even though the pandemic was happening, there were a lot of constructions of these staycations and resorts and all, due to which a lot of grasslands disappeared, right? So the wild gore, the Indian bison, even though the population is stable, it's listed as vulnerable because it continues to face threat due to habitat destruction. So my book, The Myth of the Wild Gore, the first book that I wrote, addresses this issue. Why are wild gores moving away from the forest? Why are they entering the town? And what is it? How does this lead to more of human wildlife conflict? So the first book addresses this. It's in the form of a children's book. Again, like I said, my aim is to communicate all this to children, the future of our world. So another interesting thing about this book is that the main character or the protagonist is a tribal girl. And the reason why I've made the protagonist of the story a tribal girl is because the oldest inhabitants of Kodaikanal are the tribal communities. They are slowly disappearing. Basically, hardly any of them exist anymore because they've moved into other types of occupations and all. But they are the oldest inhabitants of Kodaikanal. You might have heard about them. They collect honey from the beehives, right? They collect honey without using any protection. They don't have, those full suits with the mask like we see these days, right? They have a very simple technique of, lighting up smoke, then going up, harvesting honey in a very eco-friendly way, right? So I wanted to make her the protagonist of the story, also to say that let's pay a little respect to the oldest inhabitants of Kodaikanal. Because much of what we know about a hill station like Kodaikanal, Ooty, and all is after colonialism, right? We hardly know of the history of these mountains before colonialism, because colonization played a huge role in these hill stations when, of course, both the British and the Americans, they didn't really want to stay in the plains. It was too hot for them. They felt like they were getting a lot of tropical diseases. So they wanted to move to hill stations, and that's the establishment of Ooty, Kodaikanal and all, right? So this is my tribute to the tribal community in Kodaikanal, who are the earliest inhabitants and who haven't really been given as much significance as they ought to. So yeah, and in the myth of the wild god, it is an adventure story. So another thing that another stereotype I'm trying to break here is that eco-fiction is boring, that any conversation on environment is boring. It is not. It can be extremely fun, it can be extremely thrilling, it can be extremely adventurous. So in my book, a young girl, she goes, of course, the protagonist from the tribal community, she's the one who saves the day. And it's an adventure story. Because on one hand, suddenly a lake full of water goes missing. And then all the kids find out that a corporate is in fact stealing the water to sell it, okay? And then they discover how the Indian bison is slowly migrating away from the lakes because they no longer have water. So all my books are also written as adventure stories to kind of tell everybody that any discussion and conversation on the environment can be thrilling, fun, and adventurous. It is not a mundane topic to be discussed, right? So this is all about my first book. And, we can go on to my second book. Yeah. So this is just an excerpt I put out for you, just to give you a feel of how I write, right? So I'm just going to read this out for you. Teni continued to climb, singing a soft tune until she noticed a change in the landscape. The trees thinned out into a long swath of grassland. This was it. She now only had to walk a few meters down, and there would be the lake, nestled in the middle of the rolling folds of grass. As Teni began her descent, she heard the sound of approaching hooves. They came like an unforeseen storm, shattering the silence of the grasslands. Without thinking twice, Teni lowered herself into the thick carpet of grass. She was now beginning to think that this wasn't such a good idea at all. As the hooves approached, Teni curled up into a ball and held her breath. There, right above her hiding place, she could see a large herd of sleek animals galloping across the grassland. Sinking even lower and peeping through the corner of her eyes, Teni realized that the animals were not wild gores. They were Nilgiri tars. How majestic they looked, with their smooth golden skin and curved horns. If anyone else had been in Teni's shoes, they would have most likely confused them for mountain goats. But since Teni knew Megam Mountain like the back of her hand, she had no difficulty in identifying the beautiful creatures. Right? So, in this excerpt, you'll see that I've tried to make it adventurous, fun. And this comes in the first chapter of the book where Teni goes towards the lake in search of the Indian bison. She doesn't find them, but instead she hears the sound of other hooves. Then she realizes that they are the Nilgiri tars. So how many of you know that the Nilgiri tar is the state animal of Tamil Nadu? Yeah, you should know that, right? So, of course, the Nilgiri tar, the reason I also wanted to show you this excerpt is to tell you how I've beautifully woven the landscape of Kodaikanal into my books. And also, I've brought in animals such as the Nilgiri tar, which is actually an endangered animal. And it's also an animal which is suffering more than the Indian bison in terms of habitat degradation and destruction, right? So through children's literature, I'm able to communicate so much. On one side, there's the adventure of what Teni is going to do. On the other side, there are conversations about animals like the wild gore, like the Nilgiri tar, and like the landscapes as well, like the forests, like the grasslands. So much can be woven into children's literature. I don't have to, write an article about this to communicate what I'm trying to say. There are so many creative ways of doing it as well, right? So I just want to go ahead to my next book. The Guardians of the Forest was my second book. And this book addresses the problem of tourism. So this is a very complicated issue because on one hand, the locals need tourism to for their livelihood, right? In all hill stations, it's not just in Kodaikanal. As locals, especially the local population, they do rely on tourism for their income. And now tourism has become a year-round concern actually. 10 years ago, tourism in Kodaikanal was only very seasonal. People used to come up during summer vacations. People used to come up during winter vacations. But now it's a year-long concern. On one hand, yes, it benefits the local community. But on the other hand, you would have heard about this e-pass system. The introduction of the e-pass system was a very recent introduction actually. Over the past 3 to 4 years, we have had such a crowd in Kodaikanal that the government has to issue e-passes and visitors have to get an e-pass to come to the mountains, right? So that is how crowded it is these days. Now, I'm not saying that tourism is a bad thing. I'm not saying that visitors shouldn't visit Kodaikanal. But what I'm trying to say is people need to be more responsible. Throwing stones at the Indian bison, trying to make fun of the Indian bison, throwing litter all over the place, being more mindful of our surroundings is really important. And we, like I said, we more than thinking of these places as a tourist destination, we need to know how important they are in terms of regulating our country's climate. Without these hill stations, India would be much, much hotter than what it is, right? So they're really important for climate regulation. Many of the most unique species are found in these regions. So to be a little bit more mindful and aware whenever people visit these places, that's also my goal as a writer, right? So this, of course, again is another adventure story where a cat gets lost, a group of very sweet kids, they go into the forest to return the lost cat, and then they come across these very scary shadows. And then, so it has a little bit of magic realism in it. It has a little bit of adventure. But ultimately, the point I'm trying to communicate through this is that we need to be more responsible as tourists, right? So we can move on to the next. Yeah. So the latest book that I released is, it's called Tulir Stroll. It's a collection of poetry. It's a fully illustrated book. And what's special about this book is that I talk about the most unique plants and animals found in Kodaikanal and largely in the Western Ghats as well. Such as, commonly we know the wild gore, we know the Nilgiri tar, we know the Kurunji flower that blooms once in 12 years. Everybody, runs to visit Kodaikanal as soon as the Kurunji flower blooms. So I've also talked about that, but I've also talked about other smaller creatures like the Nilgiri flycatcher, like the Malabar giant squirrel, which is also endangered, right? So I've talked about all these animals in the form of poetry for kids, right? So the point I'm trying to say is that none of these topics about ecology or conservation have to be heavy. They don't have to be a lecture. They don't have to be an essay, an article, or a paper published. No, nobody reads those papers. Let's be realistic. If you really want to communicate something, you have to do it creatively. It could be in the form of a story, a poem, a book. So that's where you really reach out to people when it comes to conservation. And I just want to show you a little extract from this book as well. Yeah, so all of you, I'm sure, okay, how many of you have heard of the Neela Kurunji flower? Most of you, I'm sure. I'll be surprised if you haven't, right? So this is a little poem I wrote, of course, for kids, which is part of my book, Tulir Stroll. It's called A Blossom of 12. It so happens that today we're in luck, for the Neela Kurunji is as rare as a clean sock. The old and the wise believe the Kurunji helped in remembering one's time. Days, months, and years were known if one simply kept track of the bloom. While we humans adore the delicate purple petals and the shapely bell, the bees hover and buzz, hoping to get a drink as well. Honey from a Kurunji is more precious than pennies, lucky for the black bears who can get more than berries. Close your eyes and imagine the blooms, freely filling grasslands and slopes. Like dancers in purple skirts, they nod their heads, filled with hope. Let us bid farewell before the Kurunjis close their bell. We will see them again after a decade well spent. For our third stop, deeper into the sholas we head to try and spot a bottom of red. So the next poem is about the Malabar giant squirrel, which I'm not showing you. But yeah, and the Neela Kurunji, interestingly, was also the way in which the tribal communities calculated their age. They didn't have a concept of a watch or a clock or, how we have now. So they used to calculate how old they were. Every time the Kurunji flower bloomed, they would know that 12 years have passed. So it's really, really interesting. And those are the kinds of things I've interwoven with my children's poetry and stories. So a lot of research also goes into what I do. I don't write this randomly. I do my own field work, my research. So even if I do write for kids, because it's still eco-fiction and eco-literature, it requires a lot of research. It's not just purely creative, and it just doesn't come from my mind. Now, I've spoken a lot about my work, what I do differently. But now I want to focus a little bit on the writing and publishing process, which I feel would be useful for you, especially if you are planning to write something in the future. And I don't just mean eco-fiction, anything, whatever it might be, right? So, yeah. Now, the writing process. See, there is no rule to when it comes to writing, which is what I've also mentioned here. So some people, they prefer writing in a notebook. Some people like writing on Google Docs. I prefer docs actually. And some people make one chapter perfect before they move on to the next chapter, which I do. For me, every chapter has to be perfect. Some people just write the whole book and then they do drafts and revisions of those. So there's no hard and fast rule to how you should write. But you know what makes the difference between a successful writer and somebody who's, say, by success, I'm talking about an impactful writer. I don't mean success in terms of social media following. I mean success in terms of the impact of your writing. How you can become an impactful writer is by having that authentic, unique voice. Like for me, it's really important that I write stories from my own homeland. So you have to discover your authentic, unique voice. And that's when you can bring out stories that have that originality. Otherwise, every other story looks the same. Especially with, with AI, with Chat GPT and all that. Of course, the easiest thing is to write. But it's not that, it's about us having our integrity to do what we can for our own community. And that's really important, to find your authentic voice, right? And I also want to talk a little bit about the publishing process. Yeah. So I'm going to be very honest when I say this. These days, publishing is nothing but a huge industry, a money-making market. So you have to be very, very careful in this. A lot of you will see a lot of advertisements for self-publishing your books. Please don't fall into that trap, because they will promise you distribution of your books. They'll promise you advertising, but no, don't go for self-publishing, because they take away a lot of money, and in return, you will not be getting anything. And it will only lead you to be, more sadder than how you started off. So don't fall into that trap. Another trap is marketing. So I'm sure all of you in this audience also believe that the number of Instagram followers or the number of YouTube followers or the number of Facebook followers is what makes an author successful. That is false. I'm telling you this because most of I work in eco-fiction, so I can talk about this. Most of the renowned personalities in eco-fiction, including big names like Zai Whittaker, they don't even have an Instagram account. But they are called for every literary festival. Their work is what stands out, right? Not because of their Instagram and Facebook and YouTube following. No. So the reason why they are as well-known and impactful and popular as they are is because they talk about things that nobody else talks about, right? And that's what makes their work different. So yeah, when it comes to the publishing process, please don't self-publish your books. And you might think, okay, there's a Rupa publication, there's Penguin, there's HarperCollins, there's Hachette. Let me try for that. You might be disappointed. And I'm being very honest here, because majority of the time, they don't choose manuscripts written by first-time writers, right? And they also mostly go through literary agents. And you have to pay a lot to get a literary agent. So publishing in general is a very sad and it's a very grim process. It's a very challenging process. But because I've gone through it, I'll tell you that there is still hope. There are a lot of smaller publishers who are doing amazing work now and who are really, who are really becoming well known for the authenticity of their work. So you can definitely consider those options. Don't fall into the trap of marketing and publishing, because at the end of the day, I'll tell you what worked for me. I do a lot of sessions across India. I've been to literary fests. But for me, what matters the most is connecting with the audience on a very personal level. It doesn't make sense to me to show an Instagram advertisement for people to buy my books. I don't want that to happen. I want to connect with people. I need people to understand why I do the work I do before they buy my books. So that's what works out for me the best. So in case in the future, if you're planning to write anything, I'm not talking only about eco-fiction or children's literature or whatever, please choose a traditional publishing option, even if it's a smaller publisher, and please meet the people, meet the audience you are writing for. Please don't rely on social media, either in terms of popularity or in terms of marketing. So I'm actually done with this, and the floor is now open for questions if you have any. So what I was trying to do here is talk a little bit about what I do, about my work, and a little bit of insight into the writing process and the publishing industry. So I'm really looking forward to your questions because not a lot of people are open to share what they know about writing and publishing, but I am, and that's why I'm here. So if you have any doubts, concerns, questions, comments, now's your time. Yeah, and you can feel very comfortable. Yeah,
Hello.
yeah.
Ma'am, first of all, thank you so much for the session, and it was a very interesting take. I personally haven't come across such an interesting take, and even though it takes time, I really do wish that it reaches many more people, and I am really inspired by this, honestly.
Thank you so much.
And with that said, I also wanted to ask you, like, there would have been one particular incident or point which would have like pushed you to this, no, ma'am? Like, is there anything particular that inspired you to come to this field?
Okay. See, in terms of, I always wanted to do something related to language because I've always had a love for language. But what really pushed me into this was actually after I left Kodaikanal. So after I finished my schooling there and I had to, move out for my further education, my higher education, that's when I realized that there is so much about that place which people don't know. And that's when I realized that I could actually do a lot of good work there. So the whole, sometimes you don't realize what would trigger your inspiration later on. But it does happen, and it comes with a lot of reflection as well. So for me, that's what happened. When I was growing up, I never thought that I would be writing stories about Kodaikanal. I never thought that I would be, writing about the wild boar migration or the issues of tourism. It's only after I moved out that I realized that these are very important stories to talk about because nobody else was talking about them. So when you feel like only you can communicate about a certain problem, that's when you're inspired to do it. Any other questions? Yeah, I think somebody at the back. And please introduce yourself. Tell me your name.
Hi, I'm Anshi, a first year from the BA Economics department. Again, ma'am, this was a lovely presentation. Thank you so much. With that said, a small question: how did you develop your writing style after you chose to become a writer?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. The thing is, I've always been a writer. Ever since I was a child, I always wrote. And even when I was a student, I wrote for The Hindu. And even then, I used to write about concerns regarding traffic, regarding wildlife migration, etc. But I'll answer your question more in terms of how I developed my style as a children's book writer. I've always been writing, I've always been a researcher, but that has been there throughout my life. But how I developed my skill as a children's writer is because I've always had the skill and the ability to communicate very complicated issues in a very simple way, in a very descriptive way. And I realized that that is where my strength lies. So if you are, in the future, if you are planning to write, you have to really discover what your strength is. Is your strength writing non-fiction? Is your strength writing fiction? Is your strength writing children's literature? A lot of people think that children's literature is easy to write. No, it is actually, in fact, the most difficult thing to write because you're picking and choosing very complicated issues and concerns to write in a very enjoyable and simple way. So whichever is your strength, I think you really have to focus on that and develop those skills. There's no point in, picking up something which is not really your strength. Always focus on what your strength is and always focus on your authentic voice. I think that combination really will help you become more impactful. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Arimita. I'm from the second year BA Economics. My question was My question was about your writing process. Anybody who writes, it's very difficult to find a point where you're happy with what you write.
Yeah.
And sometimes the more you look at it, it just gets worse and you want to throw it all away after a point. So, how do you get to a point where you're happy with what you've put on the paper, and how do you
Yeah.
reach that satisfaction?
Okay, to be very honest, I don't think you can ever be entirely happy with what you write as a writer, and especially if you're very invested in your work, you're never going to be 100% happy. That's always there. But so, for example, for me, when I wrote The Myth of the Wild Gore, it's just a 100-page book with illustrations, but it took me 2 years, and those 2 years is because I kept giving myself breaks. So I would write, and then I would take a break. And by break, I don't mean a break of 2 days, 3 days. No, it would be a break of a month or 2 months until I forget what I've written, and then I have to go back and check and then revise my manuscript. That's how I do it. And one other thing, because she's brought it up, I want to share with you is that writing cannot be a fast-paced process. Even if you're writing a children's book which is 30 pages, no, don't rush it. If you want to really write something which is good quality and you have invested a lot in your writing, please take as much as time as you want. Because we always think, we get into this trap of, I want to write this quickly, publish this quickly, and get success quickly. It doesn't work that way, because ultimately at the end of the day, people look at the quality of your work, and that quality only comes when you have given it enough time, right? And there's no fixed kind of an idea where I say, okay, I'm completely done. It's just if I more or less feel like it's good, I go with it. But even for me to come to that stage where I say it's more or less good, it takes a lot of time. It takes at least 2 years for me to, publish even one book, because I spend a lot of time making sure it's as per my satisfaction. Yes. Any other questions? It doesn't have to be about writing or publishing. It can be about anything, about, the environment, about tourism, about Kodaikanal, anything you feel like asking.
I'm Shreya, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, about the environment, so right now there's been a trend of electric vehicles, right? And I read somewhere that the process to make the batteries, the silicon extraction and everything, it causes more pollution than the other vehicles like petrol vehicles or diesel
Yeah.
vehicles on road. But now we see that the government budget, like year by year, they do allocate like specific funds for the EV vehicles, and Tata Motors being a pioneer in the industry and everything. So, what is, as somebody who is so close to the environment and research, how do you feel, ma'am? Do you feel that moving towards electric vehicles is a sustainable shift? Or do you feel that we are again going to enter into the same space, that is not going to be a way forward?
Okay, so this is a very complicated question, and I feel like there's no one black and white answer for this question. See, my knowledge of, I understand what you're talking about, but I don't really know too much about electric vehicles and, fossil fuel use and all to comment on it. But I'm going to talk about a larger question here. This always comes up. Another question I'm going to bring here, just for you to think about, is the use of organic vegetables and fruits versus the use of what you get ordinarily in the market. Okay, the reason I'm connecting these situations is because it's all related to one thing, right? How can we really be sustainable or organic without, is it really a viable option? That's the larger question, irrespective of whether it's electric vehicles or organic vegetables or whatever. But I think what you really have to focus on is there are two things. One, of course, is which would be better in the long run for the planet. Because I think one of the reasons why we've ended up here is because we've only focused on short-term goals. We haven't really thought about, the future of the planet and how things are going to be down the line. So that is a concern we have to focus on. And which is the better evil? I know this sounds horrible, but that's the way. Nothing is going to be perfect. Nothing is going to be 100% organic or 100% clean when it comes to electric vehicles. But which is the better evil for us to, work with? That's the only way to go about it.
Hi, ma'am. I'm Darshini. Ma'am, you spoke about how the tourism affects Kodaikanal, but what do you think is the tea plantation in these regions that affect the environment of Kodaikanal, ma'am?
Yeah. So, of course, now the interesting thing about Kodaikanal is it actually doesn't have a lot of tea and coffee plantations. But I do understand where you're coming from. A lot of hill stations in India, because of colonialism especially, tea plantations and coffee plantations and estates have been a concern, especially because they have cut down the native plants. Of course, when it comes to Kodaikanal, it's the Shola forests, which were replaced by pine, wattle, and all that, even though we don't have much of a concern with coffee and tea estates. But in other regions, it is a major concern. So the only way out of it is for replantation to happen, replantation of the native species. So we can't undo the damage that has been done through these coffee and tea estates, but plantation drives are in place to reintroduce the native species. So, of course, Kodaikanal has a very different issue, and the issue is regarding the destruction of grasslands and sholas, which have been replaced by pine trees, which have been replaced by eucalyptus and wattle. So, those invasive species have really also impacted wildlife such as the Nilgiri wild tar, the wild bison, the Malabar giant squirrel, which rely on the shola plantations. But so what has happened now is replantation drives have been happening even in Kodaikanal to sort of replace the eucalyptus, pine, wattle with more native species. But another interesting thing also is that wattle, pine, and eucalyptus have also merged so well with the Kodaikanal landscape that some researchers now feel that they aren't as harmful as they once were. So they've really, the invasive species has really merged well with the native species in some locations in Kodaikanal. I think they'll just conclude now. If you have any other questions, or you can always reach out to me. I'm there on Instagram. You'll be able to find me online. So please do reach out if you have any further questions, and I'll be happy to take it up via email. So thank you so much. This was very enjoyable. I hope I was able to tell you and communicate a little bit about what I do and inspire you a little bit. Even though it might be very less, I hope I've been able to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your engaging and thought-provoking address. Your words have truly sparked important reflections in all of us here. And I really appreciated the points of how it was like a personal look into the state of the ecosystems in hill station through your work. And also on the view of the publishing process, especially for aspiring writers. That was actually very interesting. Thank you, ma'am. And now I would like to request Punita ma'am to please, sorry ma'am, okay. Now to honor this moment, I would now invite Dr. Rebecca Devaprasad, IQAC Coordinator, Assistant Professor of the Department of Economics, to kindly come forward and present a token of appreciation, a memento, to both Mr. Sabri Das from Chennai International Center and Ms. Priyadarshini as a gesture of our sincere gratitude. Thank you, ma'am. And now, to formally conclude the event, I would like to request Fernando to deliver the vote of thanks. Fernando, the stage is yours.
A very good morning to one and all present here. I'm Fernando Estes. On behalf of the Department of Economics, I would like to propose the vote of thanks for the very first event of the year 2025-26, organized by the Stella Sustainable Development Students Hub. First of all, I would like to start by giving glory to the Almighty God for making today's event a resounding success. I would like to express my deepest sense of gratitude and appreciation to our beloved principal, Dr. Sister Stella FMM, for her generous support and guidance for this event. I would like to thank our chief guest, Mrs. Priyadarshini, who has spared time despite her busy schedule to grace this occasion with her presence. We extend our heartfelt thanks to the Chennai International Center and Mr. Sabri Das for their valuable partnership for this event. I would also like to thank the head of the Department of Economics, Dr. A. Punita, for her unwavering support and consistent encouragement. We have been fortunate enough to have been backed by our dedicated faculty advisors, Dr. Rebecca Devaprasad and Mrs. Swati Shashadri, for their meticulous planning behind this event. I would like to specially thank Sister Hilda and Sister Prema for their technical support, without which this event wouldn't have been possible. And last, But definitely not the least, I would like to sincerely thank all the office bearers and student coordinators of SMSD Students Hub for their relentless dedication and invaluable contribution toward the success of this event. And finally, a big thank you to all the students present here. Your enthusiasm and presence have truly made this event more memorable and impactful. Thank you once again.
With that, we bring today's program to a close. On behalf of the Stella Mines Sustainable Development Students Hub and the Chennai International Center, thank you all once again for your presence and participation. Have a wonderful day ahead. Now, I would like to request the first years and the second years to sign the attendance sheet, which is with Mitra and Richu, and also students from other departments who are part of the SMSD Hub are expected to give their attendance at the registration desk ground floor.